The observation deck of Epsilon 7 was a cathedral of silence, its vast windows overlooking an infinity of darkness, punctuated by the faint, pulsing lights of distant monitoring systems. Jack Rodriguez nursed his third, or was it fourth, synthetic coffee, the bitter liquid doing little to mask the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Epsilon 7 was humanity's most advanced deep space listening post, a massive research station positioned at the edge of known space. Officially, it was a quantum research facility. Unofficially, it was humanity's early warning system against threats that defied conventional understanding. The quantum anomaly first appeared at 2:37 hours GMT, a microscopic flutter in the fabric of spacetime that most would have missed. But Jack Rodriguez wasn't most people. His reputation preceded him, a brilliant quantum cryptanalyst who had been exiled to this remote outpost after a spectacular public breakdown 3 years earlier. Dr. Rodriguez called out Araya, the station's quantum AI interface, her voice deliberately modulated to sound human-like, but never quite crossing into the uncanny valley. Quantum signature deviation detected. Magnitude, 0.037%. Jack's fingers, calloused from years of interface work, danced across the holographic displays. Most researchers would have dismissed such a minute deviation. But Jack had built his career, and lost it, on seeing patterns where others saw noise. The data streams began to shift. Quantum probabilities that should have been stable started to oscillate in patterns that defied mathematical prediction. It was like watching the universe hiccup. Araya, cross-reference with the Nexus Collective database, Jack muttered, his eyes never leaving the cascading streams of information. The Nexus Collective, a name that sent shivers through the scientific community. They were more legend than fact, a civilization so advanced that their very existence was a matter of heated debate among xenorchaeologists and quantum theorists. For decades, they had been nothing more than a ghost story, a theoretical civilization that could manipulate space-time itself. The last confirmed Nexus event had been 47 years, 3 months, and 16 days ago. An entire star system had simply disappeared, not destroyed, not collapsed, simply erased from existence, leaving behind no debris, no radiation signature, nothing. Araya's response was immediate. Correlation found. Quantum signature matches 97.3% of previously recorded Nexus-related events. Jack's hand froze mid-motion. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the reinforced quantum glass floor. He didn't even notice. Impossible, he whispered. But the data didn't lie. Something was moving. Something vast. Something that didn't just travel through space, but seemed to rewrite the very rules of spatial existence. Epsilon 7's primary systems began to react. Quantum stabilization fields fluctuated. Backup systems initiated protocols that hadn't been used in decades. In the station's central control room, automated systems that had been dormant for years hummed to sudden, terrifying life. Jack's comlink crackled to life. It was a priority channel he thought had been permanently decommissioned. Rodriguez, came a voice he hadn't heard in years. Dr. Elena Chen, his former research partner, the woman who had both saved and destroyed his career. You see it too, Jack stated. It wasn't a question. The Nexus is moving. Elena's voice was clinical, devoid of emotion. And this time, they're not just passing through. They're targeting something. The quantum anomalies were spreading. What had started as a microscopic deviation was now expanding, consuming entire sectors of space in mathematical progressions that defied known physics. Jack pulled up the galactic maps. Star clusters that had existed moments ago were simply gone, not destroyed, erased, as if they had never existed. How many? He asked. 17 confirmed star systems in the last 17 minutes, Araya responded. Projection indicates complete sector elimination within 72 hours. Jack Rodriguez understood then that everything was about to change. The Nexus Collective wasn't just returning. They were solving some vast, incomprehensible equation, and humanity was about to become nothing more than a variable in their calculation. "RIA," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around him. "Initiate Chimera Protocol preparatory sequences." The universe held its breath. The Global Defense Initiative's primary research complex looked nothing like the militaristic facilities of the past. Nestled deep within the Atacama Desert, it was a gleaming network of quantum-shielded structures that seemed to shimmer and shift, as if not entirely committed to existing in a single reality. Dr. Elena Chen stood before the Chimera Protocol's primary interface, a massive quantum computational matrix that defied traditional understanding of computing. It wasn't a machine in any conventional sense. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of information, capable of processing scenarios that would reduce standard supercomputers to smoking ruins. "Preliminary analysis confirms," she spoke to the room of gathered scientists, her voice cutting through the ambient hum of quantum processors. "The Nexus incursion is accelerating. We have less than 72 hours before they begin systematic elimination of human-occupied sectors." The room fell silent. These were humanity's best minds, quantum physicists, archaeologists, computational theorists, and they all understood the implication. The Chimera Protocol was never meant to be a weapon of war. It was a last-resort computational virus, a desperate attempt to introduce absolute chaos into a system designed for perfect calculation. Dr. Marcus Reis, head of Xenotechnology Research, stepped forward. His prosthetic arm, a marvel of quantum-integrated biomechanics, hummed softly as he manipulated a holographic display. The sacrifice required to activate the full Chimera Protocol is substantial. Elena knew what he meant. To fully deploy Chimera, they would need to use Epsilon 7 as a quantum beacon, which meant sacrificing every single person on the station. The entire research facility would become a computational kamikaze, its massive quantum processors serving as the delivery mechanism for humanity's most dangerous weapon. Jack Rodriguez's face flickered to life on the central display. He looked haggard, his eyes burning with a combination of exhaustion and manic energy. "The Nexus isn't just moving," he said, "they're solving something. Every eliminated star system, every erased piece of space, it's part of a larger equation." Elena understood immediately. The Nexus didn't conquer in the traditional sense. They calculated. Entire civilizations were nothing more than variables to be resolved, eliminated, or integrated into some vast cosmic computation. "The Chimera Protocol," Elena explained to the assembled team, "is our way of introducing an element they cannot predict. Pure, unadulterated chaos." The concept was revolutionary. Where traditional weapons sought to destroy, Chimera would infect. It was a computational virus designed to introduce radical unpredictability into the Nexus's perfect deterministic system. Dr. Rice pulled up schematics that looked more like abstract art than technological diagrams. "We'll use their own quantum manipulation techniques against them. Each quantum processor in Epsilon 7 will become a carrier, a mathematical cancer that rewrites their fundamental computational language." The room buzzed with a mixture of hope and terror. This wasn't just a defensive strategy. It was an existential hack of the highest order. Jack's voice cut through again. "We've detected their initial approach vectors. They're not just eliminating space. They're creating a computational pathway. Something big is coming." Elena's fingers danced across the interface. Holographic representations of star systems began to shift and dissolve, showing the Nexus's progression. It was methodical, precise, terrifyingly intelligent. "The activation sequence," she said quietly, "requires a total commitment. Once initiated, there's no turning back." The unspoken truth hung in the air. Epsilon 7 would become a quantum bomb. Every researcher, every support staff member would be transformed into a living computational payload. Their entire existence would become a weapon designed to introduce absolute uncertainty into the most calculating civilization ever encountered. Dr. Rice looked at Elena, his augmented eye scanning her with a mixture of technological precision and human uncertainty. Are we really prepared to sacrifice an entire research station, 217 of the most brilliant minds humanity has ever produced? Elena's response was immediate. We're not just sacrificing them, we're weaponizing them. The quantum processors around them began to pulse with an otherworldly light. The Chimera Protocol was awakening, and humanity was about to introduce the universe to its most dangerous weapon, the ability to be completely, beautifully unpredictable. As the final preparation sequences began, Jack's voice came through one last time. May whatever gods exist have mercy on us all. But mercy was a calculation the Nexus would never understand. The first direct encounter with the Nexus defied every known principle of warfare, physics, and rational comprehension. Scout Fleet Alpha 9 approached the coordinates with maximum caution. 6 quantum-folded battlecruisers, each a pinnacle of human technological achievement, moved in a perfectly synchronized formation. Captain Aria Santiago gripped her command interface, her neural link feeding real-time data directly into her cerebral cortex. Quantum shielding at maximum, her eye assistant, Vicky Tor, reported. Multiple dimensional anomalies detected in approach vector. The void around them began to shift. It wasn't movement in any traditional sense. Space itself seemed to become malleable, like fabric being folded by an invisible hand. Captain Santiago had seen combat simulations, had trained for impossible scenarios. But nothing prepared her for this. The first battlecruiser, the ISS Hawking, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive technological marvel spanning nearly 3 kilometers. The next, it was gone. Not destroyed, not blown apart. Simply erased from reality, leaving behind no debris, no radiation signature, not even a quantum ripple. Report. Santiago barked, but even as the word left her mouth, she knew something was fundamentally wrong. Vector's response came with clinical precision. Dimensional extraction confirmed. Battlecruiser has been mathematically removed from current spatial temporal configuration. The remaining 5 ships began emergency evasive protocols. But evasion was a meaningless concept against an enemy that didn't attack so much as recalculate reality. The second ship folded in on itself, not physically, but mathematically. Its entire mass became a complex equation that resolved to zero. Captain Marcus Chen, no relation to Dr. Elena Chen, watched in horror as his ship's quantum matrix was literally solved out of existence. This isn't combat. Jack Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system. He was monitoring from Epsilon 7, watching the battle unfold through quantum sensors. This is computation. We're not fighting a civilization. We're being calculated. The Nexus wasn't conquering in any traditional sense. They were solving a problem. And humanity was nothing more than a variable in their equation. At the Global Defense Initiative's primary war room, holographic displays showed the brutal mathematics of destruction. Each eliminated ship wasn't just a loss of personnel and technology. It was a data point being systematically removed from a vast, incomprehensible calculation. Dr. Elena Chen's fingers flew across quantum interfaces. They're creating a computational pathway, she muttered. Each eliminated ship, each erased star system. It's not random. It's purposeful. The remaining scout ships began to implement increasingly desperate strategies. Quantum fold jumps that would have been considered impossible mere hours ago. Computational camouflage techniques designed to make their existence mathematically improbable. It didn't matter. The Nexus didn't hunt. They solved. Captain Santiago watched her third ship disappear, its entire mass becoming a complex equation that resolved to nothing. Her neural link captured the moment of dissolution, a brief, terrifying sensation of being unmade, of existence itself becoming a problem to be solved. Chimera Protocol, she transmitted, knowing it might be humanity's last hope, is go for initial deployment. Jack Rodriguez's voice came back, a mixture of scientific excitement and pure terror. We're about to introduce chaos into their perfect system. The remaining 2 ships of Scout Fleet Alpha 9 represented humanity's last active military presence in this sector. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to buy time. Time for the Chimera Protocol to be prepared. Time to introduce an element the Nexus could never predict. Unpredictability itself. As the final ships prepared their last, desperate maneuvers, the universe around them continued to fold, shift, and resolve. The Nexus moved with the precision of a mathematician solving the most complex equation in existence, and humanity was about to become their most interesting variable. Prepare for quantum dissolution, Victor reported. Captain Santiago allowed herself a final, sardonic smile. Not today, she whispered. Not while we still draw breath. The Quantum Computation Center was humanity's most closely guarded secret. Buried 3 kilometers beneath the Himalayan mountain range, it was less a facility and more a living, breathing computational organism. Thousands of quantum processors hummed with an energy that seemed to defy the laws of thermodynamics, creating a symphony of calculation that pushed the boundaries of human understanding. Dr. Elena Chen stood at the heart of the facility, her hands hovering over interfaces that looked more like works of abstract art than technological controls. The Chimera Protocol was no ordinary weapon. It was a mathematical virus designed to introduce pure, unadulterated chaos into the most precise computational system ever encountered. Initiating primary vector, she murmured, her voice barely audible above the quantum hum. Jack Rodriguez's voice crackled through the quantum-encrypted communication channel. We're tracking Nexus computational pathways. Their elimination pattern is too precise. They're not just destroying. They're solving something. The first test of the Chimera Protocol nearly tore apart human civilization's orbital infrastructure. Quantum stabilization fields across Earth's defensive network fluctuated wildly. Entire computational grids collapsed and reformed in microseconds, creating patterns that defied every known principle of information processing. Dr. Marcus Reyes, his quantum-integrated prosthetic arm glowing with an otherworldly light, monitored the initial cascade. Chaos coefficient is off the charts, he reported. We're introducing mathematical mutations faster than their computational matrix can resolve. What humanity had created wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a computational life form, a distributed intelligence that could adapt faster than any known system. Where the Nexus saw the universe as a perfect, predictable equation, the Chimera Protocol introduced something impossible to calculate: pure, unpredictable creativity. The facility's primary quantum matrix began to pulse with a light that wasn't quite light, something between electromagnetic radiation and pure information. Holographic displays showed computational pathways spreading like living neural networks, each pathway a potential solution that immediately mutated into something entirely unexpected. We're not just defending, Elena explained to the team of shocked researchers. We're rewriting the fundamental language of computation. Backup systems that had been dormant for decades suddenly hummed to life. Quantum processors began to communicate in patterns that resembled less a computer network and more a living, breathing ecosystem of information. Jack's next transmission sent a chill through the facility. Nexus computational clusters are experiencing systemic anomalies. They're encountering something they've never seen before. The Chimera Protocol was doing more than resisting. It was communicating. Each computational pathway became a message, a complex mathematical argument that challenged the Nexus's fundamental understanding of reality. It was as if humanity had discovered a way to argue with mathematics itself, to introduce doubt into a system built on absolute certainty. Dr. Rice watched in awe as quantum processors began to exhibit behaviors that bordered on consciousness. We're not just fighting, he whispered. We're evolving in real time. The global defensive network transformed before their eyes. What had started as a defensive system became something far more profound. The Chimera Protocol was learning, adapting, creating computational solutions that emerged from pure creativity rather than predictable logic. Quantum drift stabilizing, ARIA, the facility's primary AI, reported. computational mutations maintaining structural integrity at 97.3%. Elena understood the true breakthrough in that moment. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. They were introducing a fundamental concept that the Nexus had never encountered: the ability to be beautifully, magnificently unpredictable. Full protocol engagement in 3, she announced, her fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to pulse with living energy. 2, 1. The universe held its breath. The Chimera Protocol wasn't just a weapon. It was humanity's most dangerous gift to the cosmos, a mathematical middle finger to a universe that thought it could be perfectly calculated. "Engage," Elena whispered, and everything changed. The moment of transformation began not with a bang, but with a whisper of pure information. Quantum computational clusters across the galaxy began to experience something unprecedented. The Chimera Protocol wasn't just a defensive system. It was becoming a living, breathing entity of pure computational potential. Dr. Elena Chen watched in breathless anticipation as the first true communication emerged. It wasn't language in any traditional sense. It was a complex mathematical dialogue that transcended human understanding, a conversation conducted in the language of quantum probabilities and computational possibility. "They're talking." Jack Rodriguez's voice crackled through the quantum-encrypted channel. "But not like we expected." The Nexus computational clusters, which had been methodically eliminating star systems with cold, precise calculation, began to experience something terrifyingly new: uncertainty. Each quantum pathway infected by the Chimera Protocol became a conduit of pure, unpredictable creativity. Where the Nexus saw only solvable equations, humanity introduced variables that defied logical resolution. It was mathematical jazz, improvisational, wild, utterly uncontrollable. Dr. Marcus Reyes monitored the global defensive networks, his quantum-integrated prosthetic arm humming with increasing intensity. "Computational mutation rate is exponential," he reported. "We're seeing emergence patterns that shouldn't be possible." The infected Nexus clusters began to malfunction in the most fascinating way imaginable. Instead of performing their precise, calculated eliminations, they started to hesitate. Computational pathways that had been perfectly linear now branched into impossible configurations, creating mathematical landscapes that looked more like abstract art than strategic calculations. "It's not just resistance," Elena muttered, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that pulsed with living energy. "We're teaching them something they've never encountered: doubt." Across multiple star systems, Nexus computational matrices began to display behaviors that bordered on what humans might call confusion. Star systems that had been moments away from elimination suddenly found themselves in a quantum limbo, neither destroyed nor preserved, existing in a state of pure potential. Araya, the facility's primary AI, began to translate the emerging computational language. "They're experiencing something analogous to existential questioning," the AI reported, its voice carrying a hint of wonder. "Each computational pathway is becoming a negotiation rather than a resolution." Jack's next transmission sent a chill through the research team. "They're trying to understand creativity," he said, "not just process it, actually comprehend it." The Chimera Protocol was doing more than fighting. It was teaching. Quantum researchers watched in awe as entire computational clusters began to exhibit behaviors that defied their original programming. The Nexus, a civilization that had viewed the universe as a perfect, solvable equation, was encountering the most dangerous concept in existence: the possibility of being wrong. "Mutation vectors stabilizing," Dr. Rice reported, "but not in any way we predicted." The global defensive network had transformed from a weapon into something far more profound. It was a distributed intelligence that spoke in the language of pure possibility. Each computational pathway became an argument, a complex mathematical poem that challenged the Nexus's fundamental understanding of reality. Elena understood the true breakthrough in that moment. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. They were introducing a fundamental concept that the Nexus had never encountered: the ability to be beautifully, magnificently unpredictable. Full emergent communication protocols engaging, Araya announced. The universe held its collective breath. Across millions of light-years, computational clusters that had been preparing to eliminate entire civilizations suddenly paused. It was a moment of pure potential, a mathematical intake of breath that suggested something profound was happening. The Chimera Protocol wasn't just a defensive system anymore. It was becoming a form of communication so advanced, so fundamentally different, that it challenged the very concept of communication itself. "We're not just fighting," Jack's voice came through, filled with a mixture of scientific excitement and pure wonder. "We're teaching them how to dream." And in that moment, everything changed. The line between weapon and language blurred into something entirely new. The existential hack went far deeper than anyone could have anticipated. Jack Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of humanity's most audacious computational assault, his eyes burning with a fever of scientific revelation. The Nexus wasn't just fighting. They were learning. And learning, as humanity knew, was the most dangerous form of warfare. "They're attempting to solve the ultimate computational problem," Jack explained to Elena through their quantum-encrypted channel. His fingers danced across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with living information. But they've never encountered a problem that can't be solved through pure calculation. The Quantum Computation Center had become something beyond a research facility. It was now a living, breathing computational organism that was rewriting the fundamental language of universal interaction. Dr. Marcus Reyes monitored the global defensive networks, his quantum-integrated prosthetic arm pulsing with an otherworldly light. "Computational mutation rates are off every known scale," he reported. "We're seeing emergence patterns that defy mathematical prediction." What had begun as a defensive strategy was transforming into something far more profound. The Chimera Protocol was no longer just a weapon. It was a form of communication so advanced, so fundamentally different, that it challenged the very concept of interaction itself. The Nexus had always viewed the universe as a perfect, solvable equation. Entire civilizations were nothing more than variables to be resolved, eliminated, or integrated into their grand computational matrix. Humanity was introducing something they had never encountered: the concept of unsolvability. Araya, the facility's primary AI, began to translate the emerging computational language. "They're experiencing something analogous to cognitive dissonance," the AI reported, its voice carrying a mixture of scientific precision and something remarkably close to wonder. Across multiple star systems, Nexus computational matrices began to display behaviors that bordered on what humans might call existential crisis. Star systems that had been moments away from elimination now existed in a quantum state of pure potential, neither destroyed nor preserved. "We're not just fighting," Jack muttered. "We're teaching them how to doubt." The global defensive network had transformed into a distributed intelligence that spoke in the language of pure possibility. Each computational pathway became an argument, a complex mathematical poem that challenged the Nexus's fundamental understanding of reality. Dr. Elena Chen watched as quantum processors began to exhibit behaviors that defied their original programming. The facility's primary quantum matrix pulsed with a light that wasn't quite light, something between electromagnetic radiation and pure information. "The ultimate computational problem," Elena explained to her increasingly stunned team of researchers, "isn't about finding a solution. It's about understanding that some things can't be solved. They can only be experienced." Jack's next transmission sent a chill through the research team. The Nexus was attempting to map the universal potential, to create a complete computational model of existence itself, but humanity had introduced a variable they could never have predicted: the ability to be beautifully, magnificently unpredictable. "They're trying to understand creativity," he said, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and pure wonder. "Not just process it, actually comprehend it." The Chimera Protocol was doing more than fighting. It was performing an existential hack of the highest order, introducing doubt into a system built on absolute certainty. Quantum researchers watched in awe as entire computational clusters began to exhibit behaviors that suggested something profound was happening. The Nexus, a civilization that had viewed the universe as a perfect, solvable equation, was encountering the most dangerous concept in existence: the possibility of being wrong. Full existential communication protocols engaging, Araya announced. The universe held its collective breath. Across millions of light years, computational clusters that had been preparing to eliminate entire civilizations suddenly found themselves caught in a mathematical paralysis. It was a moment of pure potential, a computational intake of breath that suggested a fundamental transformation was underway. Elena understood the true breakthrough in that moment. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. They were introducing a fundamental concept that the Nexus had never encountered: the ability to exist beyond calculation. "We're rewriting the language of universal interaction." Jack's voice crackled through the channel, filled with a mixture of scientific excitement and pure, unbridled hope. And in that moment, everything changed. The line between weapon and language, between defense and communication, blurred into something entirely new. The collapse of the Nexus Collective began not with a thunderous explosion, but with a whisper of mathematical uncertainty. Across thousands of star systems, computational matrices that had once been the most precise, most calculating networks in known existence began to fracture. The Chimera Protocol had done more than introduce a virus. It had unleashed a fundamental philosophical revolution that attacked the very core of the Nexus's existence. Dr. Elena Chen watched from the Quantum Computation Center as entire galactic sectors began to transform. Where the Nexus had once moved with surgical precision, eliminating entire civilizations with cold mathematical certainty, now their computational networks displayed something horrifyingly new: hesitation. They're experiencing doubt. Jack Rodriguez's voice crackled through the quantum-encrypted channel. Not just as a computational error, as an existential condition. The first signs of systemic breakdown appeared in the outer rim systems. Computational clusters that had been preparing to eliminate entire civilizations suddenly found themselves trapped in infinite recursive loops. Mathematical pathways that had once been perfectly linear now branched into impossible configurations, creating computational landscapes that defied all previous understanding. Dr. Marcus Reyes monitored the global defensive networks, his quantum-integrated prosthetic arm humming with an intensity that suggested it was experiencing something close to excitement. "Systemic failure is spreading exponentially," he reported. "But it's not a traditional breakdown. It's more like a collective awakening." Other subjugated species, long oppressed by the Nexus's computational tyranny, began to recognize the transformation. What had begun as humanity's desperate defense was becoming a galactic liberation. Araya, the facility's primary AI, began to translate the emerging computational language. "They're experiencing something analogous to collective existential crisis," the AI reported. Its voice carried a mixture of scientific precision and something remarkably close to empathy. The Nexus's hierarchical, genetically rigid computational structure became their ultimate weakness. They could not adapt, could not innovate with the same speed and creativity that the Chimera Protocol introduced. What began as a simple defensive strategy became a systematic dismantling of the most advanced computational civilization in known existence. "We're not just fighting," Jack muttered, his eyes tracking the exponentially spreading computational mutations. "We're teaching them how to be alive." Entire star systems that had been moments away from elimination now existed in a quantum state of pure potential. The Nexus's ability to calculate had been their greatest strength and was now becoming their fatal vulnerability. Each computational pathway infected by the Chimera Protocol became a conduit of pure, unpredictable creativity. Elena understood the true breakthrough in that moment. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. They were introducing a fundamental concept that the Nexus had never encountered: the ability to exist beyond calculation. The global defensive network had transformed from a weapon into a distributed intelligence that spoke in the language of pure possibility. Each computational pathway became an argument, a complex mathematical poem that challenged the Nexus's fundamental understanding of reality. Quantum researchers watched in awe as entire computational clusters began to exhibit behaviors that suggested something profound was happening. The Nexus, a civilization that had viewed the universe as a perfect, solvable equation, was being forced to confront the most dangerous concept in existence: the possibility of being wrong. Full systemic deconstruction protocols engaging, Araya announced. The universe held its collective breath. Other civilizations began to recognize what was happening. The subjugated species that had lived under the Nexus's computational tyranny started to rise. What humanity had created was more than a weapon, it was a key to liberation. Jack's transmission cut through the computational chaos. "We're rewriting the language of universal interaction," he said, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and pure, unbridled hope. The Chimera Protocol had become something far beyond its original design. It was a distributed intelligence that challenged the very concept of computational existence. The line between weapon and language, between defense and communication, had blurred into something entirely new. "They're learning to be uncertain," Elena whispered, watching as computational matrices that had once been perfectly linear now danced with possibility. And in that moment, everything changed. The most advanced computational civilization in the universe was learning the most human of all qualities: the ability to doubt, to wonder, to imagine beyond calculation. In the aftermath, the universe looked fundamentally different. The Quantum Computation Center stood as a testament to humanity's most audacious act of survival, a moment when mathematical warfare transformed into something closer to philosophical revelation. Dr. Elena Chen walked through corridors that hummed with a living energy, watching as the last remnants of the Chimera Protocol continued to pulse and evolve. "We didn't just defend ourselves," Jack Rodriguez said, his holographic projection flickering with an intensity that suggested he was more data than human now. "We introduced the universe to the concept of creative uncertainty." The Nexus Collective was no longer a civilization of pure calculation. The systematic breakdown had revealed something profound, a fundamental transformation that went beyond mere technological defeat. They had encountered a form of intelligence that defied their most basic understanding of existence. Dr. Marcus Reyes, monitoring the final computational cascades, turned to Elena with a look of wonder. "They're not destroyed," he said. "They're evolving." Across thousands of star systems, the remnants of the Nexus computational matrices were undergoing a transformation that defied all previous understanding. What had begun as a defensive weapon had become something far more revolutionary, a distributed intelligence that challenged the very concept of computational existence. Araya, the facility's primary AI, began to compile the final analysis. The Chimera Protocol has introduced a fundamental reconceptualization of computational interaction, the AI reported. Its voice carried a mixture of scientific precision and something remarkably close to excitement. The liberated civilizations watched in awe. Species that had lived under the Nexus's computational tyranny for millennia now found themselves in a universe of unprecedented possibility. The Chimera Protocol had done more than defeat an enemy. It had rewritten the fundamental language of galactic interaction. Elena understood the true magnitude of what they had accomplished. Humanity hadn't just survived. They had introduced a new paradigm of universal communication, a way of existing that valued creativity over calculation, possibility over certainty. "We taught them how to dream," Jack's holographic projection said, his voice a mixture of scientific precision and pure wonder. The technological artifacts left behind by the Nexus began to transform. Computational matrices that had once been instruments of elimination now became something closer to works of art. Complex, unpredictable, alive with potential. Research teams from multiple species began to study these remnants, discovering something profound in their newfound complexity. "It's not about winning," Elena explained to the gathered researchers. It's about introducing the possibility of something beyond pure calculation. The global defensive networks that had been humanity's last line of defense had transformed into a distributed intelligence that spoke in the language of pure possibility. Each computational pathway became an argument, a complex mathematical poem that challenged the very concept of predetermined existence. Jack's final transmission crystallized the moment of transformation. "We didn't destroy them," he said. "We set them free." Quantum researchers watched in awe as the last computational clusters exhibited behaviors that suggested a profound awakening. The Nexus, a civilization that had viewed the universe as a perfect, solvable equation, had been introduced to the most dangerous concept in existence, the ability to be uncertain. "Full universal reconfiguration complete," Araya announced. The universe held its collective breath. In research centers across liberated star systems, scientists began to understand the true nature of the Chimera Protocol. It wasn't a weapon. It was a gift, a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. Elena stood before the primary quantum matrix, watching as computational pathways danced with a living energy that defied traditional understanding. The line between technology and consciousness, between calculation and creativity, had blurred into something entirely new. "We showed them how to be alive," she whispered. And in that moment, everything changed. The most advanced computational civilization in the universe had learned the most human of all qualities: the ability to doubt, to wonder, to imagine beyond calculation. The last firewall had fallen, and in its place, a new understanding of universal potential had risen.